Hello there, welcome to this video. We are going to create a spider. What are spiders? Spiders are classes that you define and that Scrapy uses to scrape or extract information from a website or a group of websites. In order to create a spider, the spider must also subclass to the Scrapy.spider class. So when you create a spider, you have to it has to be derived from the Scrapy.spider, and you also have to define the initial request that you want the spider to scrape or get information from. A spider basically is created as a Python script. So what I'm going to do is create a new Python script. So under my project folder here, my Scrapy project, I'm going to expand that, and inside this directory called spiders, I'm going to right click, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to create a new file. Click on new file, and I'm going to call this quotes. You can call it whatever name you like, and I'm going to make that an underscore spiders. So feel free to call yours whatever name you want. So it'll be quotes underscore spiders dot py. Okay, so that is going to be where I define my class for the spider. The first thing we want to do inside this file is import Scrapy. So we'll type in inside the editor here, just type in import space Scrapy. Got to import it so that we can use it. Alright, now we have to define our class. So to define a class, you just type in class. So we're now creating our first spider. You do a space. I'm going to give the spider a name. I'm going to call it quotes spider. Okay, that's going to be the name of the spider, and we're going to subclass it from Scrapy.spider. Notice the S has to be uppercase, and then outside the parentheses we do the colon, and then we tab, and then we give it a name. The name basically identifies the spider, and it must be unique within a project. That means you can't set the same name for different spiders. So specify name in lowercase, and the name I'm going to give my spider, I'm going to call it quotes. So you put the name in between quotes, so you can use either single or double quotes. So that's the name for my spider. You tab down. Notice the indentation very important in Python. If not, it affects how your code works. In some cases it may not even work if the indentation is not right. The next thing we want to do is specify the URL or URLs we want to scrape. So to specify the URL we want to scrape, we type in start underscore URLs, and we set that to equals 2. So you could have more than one URL, and you can specify them in between the brackets. So I'm going to tab in between the brackets to separate it, and I will specify the website that I want to scrape, which is a website I put together. So this is the link. So I'm just going to copy this link and put that in the start URL. Okay, so I've copied that, and you have to enclose it in quotes. So I just right click and paste. So that's the URL I'm going to be scraping. This is the website, so you have to indicate it. You can scrape multiple websites, so if you got more URLs you want to add, you can also add that in between the brackets. I'm going to end this video here, and we will continue in part 2 with building our spider. The next thing I want to do is create a parse method, which will be called to handle each of the requests for each URL that we would have specified. So to do that, we do def to create the parse method, do space PARSE for parse, and it takes in 2 arguments. The first is self and the second is the response object. Okay, and then we have to add the colon. Don't forget to add the colon there, and then tab. So let me explain what the self is. If you're not used to Python, if you're new to Python, the self basically represents the instance of the class. So by using the self keyword, we can access the attributes and the methods of the class which we have defined. And the second argument is the response object. Every HTTP request sent to the server also returns a response from the server. That response is what is known as a response object. Next thing I want to do is create a for loop that will loop through each of these quotes in the div, and it will extract the individual quote and also the author. So if I view the source page for this website, I just right click and go view page source. So what I want to do, each quote is embedded inside a div class. So this is one div class. I've got several of them on this web page. So each of the div class has a paragraph, which is a class, and that contains a quote. It also has another paragraph, which is a class that contains the author. So I'm going to create a for loop that will loop through each of these divs and pull out the quote and also pull out the author. So those are the 2 things I am scraping from each of the divs. Before I continue with the spider, I just want to quickly describe something called selectors. Scrapy comes with its own mechanism for extracting data out of a website, and they are referred to as selectors. And what they do, they select certain parts of the HTML documents which can be specified either by using CSS expressions or XPath. XPath is basically a language that is used for selecting the nodes in XML documents, which can also be used with HTML. CSS basically is a language for applying styles to HTML documents. In this course, I'll be using the CSS selectors and not the XPath. So we'll not be covering XPath. We're going to be using the CSS selectors to extract data. So let me continue with the spider. So what I want to do now is create a for loop. So you type in for to define the for loop, and I'm going to say for quotes. So this is what I'm going to be looping through. So for quotes in the response objects, so what gets returned. So I'm going to say for quote in response.css. So we're going to be using the CSS to do the scraping of the data, and for that we need to specify what it is we are scraping. So I'm going to be scraping the div that contains the quote, a single quote, and also the author. So inside the quotes here, I'm going to type in the CSS selector, which is a div, and then you attach the value of the attribute, which is the name of the div, and the div is called quotes. That's one of them. All right, and then I'll add outside the parentheses, I'll just add my colon, and I'll tab down. Next, we need to define the yield. A yield is a keyword that is used to return, okay, except the function will return a generator. So in order to understand what a yield is, you need to understand what generators are. Generators are basically iterators. So they're a kind of iterable that you can use to only iterate over. So it lets you iterate over something once. Generators do not store all the values in memory. They generate the values on the fly. So you can then use a yield keyword to return something. Okay, so that's what the yield is for. So I'll type in yield, and you have to enclose it in curly braces. So I'll tab in between the curly braces, and inside there I will specify what it is I am extracting. So I've added a couple of lines of code here just to save time. So here on line 13, basically what I'm doing here, this is going to be the yield. So quote .quote.css. The CSS is the selector that I'm using to extract, and what we're extracting is a paragraph element, and the paragraph is a class, so we have a dot to indicate the name of the class. This is the class for the paragraph class that contains each quote, and it's called this. And you can see I've got these two dots here, which means I only want it to extract the text. I don't want the tags, just get me the text. And then outside this method, you have to use a dot extract method as well. So you use the dot extract. And then in the second line here on line 14, it's basically the same thing, but here I've used extract. And then what I need to do, I need to add another thing, underscore first. And what this will do, basically it will extract the first author. So let me explain the difference between the extract underscore first and extract. The best way to do that is by going to the website. So this is the page we're scraping here. Now if I use the extract dot first on the page, for example this paragraph class, if it's a paragraph class, for example here now, if I use the extract underscore first, it will only grab the first line, it will discount the two. So that's why here I've used extract, which means it will get me all the text from that particular class. Okay, and if you notice in the author I have specified extract underscore first, and the reason I've done that is because there's just one line here. It will only have one line, so it's going to grab the first line. So it's okay to use it for that because there's only one line. If you had multiple lines like this, then I would do extract all. I would just do extract, which means it will grab all the text. Okay, so the spider is basically ready. So I'm just going to click file and save all. So before I wrap up, just remember that this method here, this parse method, is a method that will be called to handle each of the requests for the URL. That if you specify multiple URLs, this method here is what will be used to handle the request for the URL. Okay, so that's it for this video. In this video we completed the creation of a Scrapy spider. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.